Hi, it's Ramesha here with Vocal Bliss. Today I would like to talk about a topic that is fairly common among aspiring singers, which is a voice that sounds nasal. What do you do when your voice, instead of it's more like and it's got that nasal quality that is not particularly attractive. Usually when that happens is because when we sing, we have our soft palate, which is that portion of your palate that is closer to your uvula, the little piece of thing that's dangling down from the roof of your mouth. That portion of your palate is too relaxed. And what that means is when you sing, the soft palate is supposed to lift up a little bit and somewhat close the passage towards the nasal cavity. I say not somewhat because it doesn't happen completely, and it shouldn't happen completely, because we want some of the voice, some of the sound to travel not out of your mouth, but also out of your nose, believe it or not, because that gives the sound beauty, resonance, overtones, beautiful richness of tone that would otherwise not be possible. But when we lower and relax the soft palate too much, then too much sound travels up into your nose instead of out through your mouth. And so the ratio is no longer appropriate, let's say. And so there's too much sound going out of your nose. And when that happens, you hear instead of ah. Okay, so what do we do to fix this? Because this is what we need to address here. So we need to train our soft palate to lift up more, so to be more engaged when we sing a vowel, when we sing a note, and so that the sound doesn't go too much in your nose and more sound comes out of your mouth. Now, I just want you for a moment to understand the difference between the two. So if your soft palate is completely relaxed, that's when you have a sound like this. It's almost like humming. There's almost nothing coming out of my mouth, and almost all the sound goes out through your nose. And as you can tell, that's as nasal as it could possibly sound. So in order to correct this, we have to gradually basically tense a little bit your soft palate, so that if you open your mouth, and you will see your soft palate has a shape like this. It's round, like a dome, like slightly like a dome. When you sing and produce a sound, instead of being round like this, it's got more of a shape like that. And that's what it's supposed to do. If it doesn't do that, and if for some reason the soft palate isn't able to get into motion and get engaged that way, then the sound will be nasal. So in order to correct this, what we need to do is train that muscle. And the easiest way to train the soft palate to do its job, basically, is by super duper enunciating your vowels. Usually the vowels that tend to be more nasal are the more open vowels, like a or o, sometimes u. So you hear like or you hear oh. But there are other vowels like e, for example. It's a little bit easier to not make that nasal. And so maybe we can start with the vowel E. And what I'd like you to focus on is concentrate on enunciating that vowel very, very clearly, like you're almost speaking more than singing. So you're like E. Let's start with E because it's easier, and then we'll move on to the other vowels. So you go E, 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 as opposed to E, 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 E. If you do it well, you should feel this part of the throat, the soft palate, engaging and lifting up. If you open your mouth and you go in front of a mirror, you will see that too. Maybe not with E, but with ah. The difference between and ah, there's a difference. You will see the back of your throat, the soft palate, lifting up and making that shape that I was talking about. So enunciate E, E, and then hold it. E, and make it for now maybe a little bit edgy of a sound. That's to counterbalance the nasal quality which was present before. You have to do the opposite. So for now, just E, and then try with E, ah, ah. Make sure it's not ah. You will notice if you do it this way that some more work needs to happen in your throat muscles, and that's fine. You know, we need to train these muscles to do the right work without overwhelming them. So don't do it too much in the beginning, but make sure that you super enunciate. So ah, oh, ooh, and really be very clear in the way you enunciate these vowels. No in between for now. No diphthongs. Try to use pure vowels and enunciate this way. When you've done this for a little while, you should notice a difference in the tone. The tone all of a sudden is no longer nasal, or maybe it's less nasal. So that tells you that you're moving in the right direction. So keep going, you know, maybe hold it a little bit longer. Then after a while, I wouldn't suggest you do this right away, but after maybe a week or two of doing this to correct. So we're correcting something, so we're going a little bit too far the other way in order to correct an imbalance. So once you've done this work for a little while, then what you want to do is to get rid of the edginess in the tone, because as you can tell, it's not particularly beautiful either. It's not more beautiful than So what you want to do is gradually to relax again the soft palate, but only enough to get to a sound that is actually round and polished. You don't want to relax too much and go back to sounding nasal. So instead of eventually you'll gradually relax until you reach a point where it's relaxed, but it's not completely relaxed, so it doesn't sound nasal, but it's relaxed enough that some of the sound is able to access again your nasal passages behind your uvula, so going to your nose, and activate the sinuses, which are natural amplifiers of the sound, and help to create the resonance and the fullness and richness of the tone. So this is a process that might take a little bit of time, depending how bad your nasal quality is in the sound and how long it's been going on for. But it's very, very important to correct it, because it's just not particularly appealing to hear somebody sing nasally. The one good thing about being able to send your tone into your nasal passages is there's something that comes in handy when you learn how to transition into your head voice, because your head voice uses more the nasal cavities for that's where you send the tone to transition from your low chest voice to your high notes, your head voice. But I don't want to go into this right now because I don't want to confuse you, but just so you know, it is something that is not completely useless. It's actually helpful in a certain certain aspects and at a certain stage of your vocal development, which is when you learn to transition from chest to head. But when it's too much, then it's just not particularly pretty to listen to. So let's recap briefly what I suggest you do. If you want to understand better what I'm talking about, go in front of your mirror, open your mouth, and just sing ah as opposed to nasal. And you'll notice the difference in your soft palate. When it's nasal, it's lower, and when it's not nasal, it has a shape like this, which means it's engaged and it's partially closing the nasal passage. So, but let's recap what you can do to fix it. So number one, enunciate the vowel very clearly, more like speaking. Make sure you find a really almost edgy sound, I would say. And then hold that sound. First E, hold it and try to not become nasal. Just hold it there like that. And do this with all the 5 vowels, E, O, U. And pay special attention to the vowel A and O, which usually tend to be the worst ones in terms of nasal. And then when you've done this long enough, which could take up to a week, 2 weeks, depending on how bad basically your nasal sound is, then gradually bring the tone back to a more normal balance, where it's not nasal but it's not so edgy, and gradually relax the throat so that the sound can become a little bit more smooth. But do it very, very gradually, because if you do it too far, you might go back to sounding nasal. So anyway, I've used this with a lot of success with my students who had that issue. I didn't have very many students like that, but it happened a few times. And like I said, especially the vowel was the most affected. So this is what I'm giving to you to work on. So let me know how this goes. If you want, you can post your comments in the comment section below. I'm very, very curious to see if this works for you. And as always, if you found this helpful, please consider give it thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel if you want to receive more of these videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I wish you all the best with your singing, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.